Hi everyone, Exelier Gaming here, and I wanted to run you through a quick tutorial on how to remove audio from your overlays. So one of the main issues that I had is OBS doesn't currently have a way for you to control the audio of your transitions between scenes. So if you're using something like an animated stinger transition, which is an animation that lets you transition between scenes while playing some animated graphic over top, you won't be able to control the audio. And I found this to be an issue when I purchased an overlay pack from own.tv, and it comes in webm formats. As you can see here, I'll play you an example of what it came with, and this is at 25% volume to give you an idea of how loud it was. So what I'm trying to do is remove the audio from this stinger transition, but without losing the transparency layer. There's only a few different types of video codecs that currently support transparency, and when trying to remove audio, I realized that a lot of the editors such as DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere don't keep the transparency layer when you export them. So you can see here that the file formats that support transparency are Apple ProRes 444, which is very large and usually for uncompressed videos. It's not something you'd want to use in OBS. HEVC or H265, which while it does support transparency, Adobe Premiere does not support exporting with transparency layer or alpha channels enabled, and webms. This is what I'll be focusing this video mostly on, VP8 or VP9 video codecs. Both support transparency. But if you use something like Stream Elements, you'll see that when you go to add a widget and add a static video, there's only a few supported formats, a few image formats here, and if you want something animated, webm is the only supported one. I found that common video editing software like Adobe Premiere 2020, DaVinci Resolve, or even the open source Lightworks don't have full support for webm yet. Adobe Premiere 2020 can support webm with the help of a plugin from fnordware.com, which is available on Mac and Windows. You'll find that when you open your Premiere project and import your video, once you go to export it, the webm format is supported. And if you scroll down, you can choose VP8 or VP9. VP9 is the preference if you are trying to get the highest quality at the lowest file size. And if you keep scrolling, you'll have the option to include alpha channel, and you can go ahead and export. The issue with Adobe Premiere 2020, even including that plugin, is once you export, the alpha channel is not maintained. If I import it here into OBS as a stinger transition and preview it, you can see it turns the whole screen black before transitioning and then shows the next scene. We lose that transparency that I showed you earlier. Now what I'm about to show you is the easiest and simplest way that I found to remove audio from your webm and maintain its transparency. If you go to easygif.com/mute-video, link will be below in the description. You can select Choose File, pick your original webm that has the audio you want removed, click Open, click Upload Video and give it a moment. Go ahead and click Mute Video, and the muted video will appear below. And this will be at its original speed. You can see that the transparency is maintained here. And if we want to test this, you can go ahead and save this video, go back to OBS, check your downloads where it should have exported it, and go ahead and preview the transition. If you're happy with the speed and the quality, that's all you have to do. If you want to speed up, slow down, or maintain or improve the quality of your transition, go ahead and keep watching. And if you haven't dropped a sub already, please hit the subscribe button below so you can see when I release new videos that may help you on your own streaming journey. I know I'd really appreciate it, and so would he. How can you say no to that face? So if you're looking for a bit more flexible but complicated way to remove audio or speed up or slow down your transitions, then the next thing I want to talk about is Ffmpeg. Ffmpeg is supported on Linux, Solaris, BSD, Windows, Mac. You can get it on any distribution or almost any distribution of operating system. The first thing you'll want to do is visit this GitHub page. I'll include the link in the description below, and come down here. And for us, we're going to download the fullbuild.zip file. If you open this file, you can easily drag and drop it to any folder you want. Once extracted, you can navigate inside the Ffmpeg folder and go inside the bin folder. This is the executable that you'll be running everything from. If you hold down Shift and right-click that folder, you'll have an option to open a Windows terminal. If you type Ffmpeg here, you'll see all the options that it enables you to do. So if we switch to our command line, I'll show you how to do what we did in easygif.com. The first thing that we'll try is removing just the sound. Now with Ffmpeg, you have to specify the codec of the video, and we're specifying libvpx. This corresponds to VP8, then -I and the path to the webm that you're trying to edit, followed by any options that you want to apply to the output. -an essentially ignores the audio, says audio none is what I think of it as, so that the output should be muted. So I just want to show you this first so you see what happens when the wrong codec is selected. It'll say, failed to decode frame, bitstream not supported. So what we know now is that this webm must use VP9. So the way that you do that is you just change that codec video at the beginning to this, libvpx-VP9. Now, I've already created all the files I'm about to show you, so I'll overwrite this first one just so you see what the process looks like and what a success should look like. So you'll see it iterating through the frames down here at the bottom, and the frames per second and the current bitrate. This will actually change when it's complete to show the bitrate that you think of as the quality. So notice here it says neither bitrate nor constrained quality specified, using default CRF, or the constant rate factor, of 32. So this will actually give a variable bitrate at the end, but it tries to maintain a certain level of quality. You see here when it finished, it changed to 3,587 kilobits per second. So if you're a Twitch streamer, you probably know that most of the recommendations at, say, 1080p 30 frames per second is 4,500 kilobits per second. And at 1080p 60 frames per second, they recommend you stream at 6,000 kilobits per second. That'll give you an idea or ballpark of the quality to expect from this output. And it's actually hard to see by the human eye most of the time, especially depending on the speed of your transition. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. In most cases, default is fine, and I'll show you as we move ahead. Now, the next thing that we may want to experiment with is removing the sound and speeding up your file. Now, something I have to caution you about with this command is the set presentation time filter on the video. This is what we added here, is essentially taking a timestamp, say, show this frame at 1 second, and multiplying it by 0.25. So you're saying, show this frame at 1/4 of a second instead. So what this ends up doing is you're only really showing every 1 in 4 frames. So your video can look choppier when you speed it up. You're essentially getting frame drop to therefore make your video less total frames and faster. Now, if you want to avoid this frame drop, the next thing you need to do is add one additional argument to actually increase the frame rate of your video. Now, to get the frame rate of your video, you can right-click the file, click Properties, and go to the Details tab. You see here it says 30 frames per second, so you'll want to note that for the next step. Now, if we go back to the command line, the next command adds one additional argument. You'll see the -R120 here. What we're doing is essentially increasing the frame rate here to 120 frames per second, but also taking every 1 in 4 frames. This way, you don't drop any frames, but still speed up your video by 4x. So the reason this is important is whatever your original frame rate was, if you are increasing the speed of your video by 4x, you need to multiply that frames per second also by 4. So if this was 0.5, this would be 60. If this was 0.12, this would be 240. They scale inverse of each other. When one goes up, the other goes down. So I've already created this video. I want to show you a comparison between the muted video with frames dropped and the muted video with the increased frame rate, so no frames dropped. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. I slowed it down a little bit for you, so you can see that as the hexagons are appearing and disappearing from the screen, there's more steps or intermediate versions of the hexagon showing as they appear and disappear on this muted version that has the additional frame rate added. So if you want to maintain the smoothness of your animation, it's important you also increase the frame rate while changing the presentation timestamps on the video. So the next thing I want to show you is how to change the bit rate while speeding up or slowing down your video. So this adds one more argument. We have the executable, the codec that we're using, which is VP9 in this case, your input file, which is what we're trying to edit, and this time you add -b:\v. This is the bitrate for your video, and we're going to do 16K. I'm setting this super low so that we can for sure see the quality differences. So if I hit enter here, I'll actually overwrite this because the build time should be really quick. So the next one we're going to do is a high bitrate sample so I can compare the two. This one has the bitrate set to 24,000 kilobytes per second. And that one I already have generated. That one would take a while to create, so I'm not going to do that now. So if you look at the low bitrate version, you can see when I pause it in the middle how blurry it is around the edges here. And if I were to zoom in, you'll see just how poor of a quality that is, but you do get a lower file size. Now, if we look at the version 15 with the high bitrate set and pause in the middle, you can see how crisp and smooth this glow and the edges of the hexagons are, but it's at a trade-off of a larger file size. If we go compare those file sizes, you can see that this is only 146 kilobytes, while this is 3.48 megabytes. All of the examples I've shown you so far remove the audio from the webm or assume that you don't currently have audio. If that's the case, you don't have to include the -an switch, which removes the audio if you already have a silent webm that you're working with. Now, if you want to keep the audio in your webm and speed it up or slow it down along with the video, it's important that you follow along in this next section and use these additional switches. If you don't use these switches, what will happen is the audio will either be longer than your video or shorter than your video. And in the case of it being longer, you'll actually end up with just a black screen and audio continuing to play, which is not the result that we want. Now, if I go back to the command line, the sample command here, again, is a lot of the same things that we've been using, except this time, instead of -filter:\v, we're using an argument -filter_complex. And what this is saying is use video track 0, set the presentation timestamp like we did previously, so we're speeding it up by 4x for the video track. Now, audio track 0, set the audio tempo to 4x of what it was. So we're speeding up the video by 4x and speeding up the audio, and then mapping the video and the audio. Now, I'm not super clear on what these switches are for, but I know they're required when you're doing this argument. Now, again, you'll notice that we don't have our -r argument to increase the frame rate. So this will have dropped frames, which I've highlighted here in the file name. If you want to, you can also include the -r argument right here. Right before your -filter complex, you can increase the frame rate as well to make sure there are no dropped frames. Now let's go compare those two. So here's the webm with audio and video sped up by 4x, but with frame drops. And here's the webm with audio and video sped up by 4x, but with no frame drops. Now before I go, I want to show that each of these does in fact maintain the transparency by previewing them in OBS. We have our first one from EasyGIF that we muted. The transition was a little early there, but it works. Now let's move to the one we did in Ffmpeg. We can see that also maintains the transparency. Now we'll continue moving on with the rest of them, and I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video at this point. You stuck with me this far? You're awesome. You should now be prepared to edit your webms for both your transitions or overlays such as alerts in OBS Studio. Please remember that I also Twitch stream live every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday from 6 to 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/Exilier. You can come check me out just to hang out and chat while I'm gaming, or possibly get a live tutorial on new things that I'm trying out and learning to improve my own streams. And that's a wrap.